Skeleton Crew, the series premiere. Skeleton Crew kicks off with its first episode offering a fresh take on the Star Wars universe from Disney Lucasfilm. But, does it stick the landing? The premiere starts with an action sequence, the only one in the episode, as Captain Silvo's pirate gang boards and raids a merchant bulk freighter in search of credits. It's unexpected, but welcome, quickly signaling that pirates will play a significant role in this series. And the sequence itself? It's decent. Nothing groundbreaking, and it clearly, very much clearly, takes inspiration from A New Hope's opening, swapping out the Imperials and Rebels for pirates and merchants. I mean, they even redo the whole Vader and Captain Antilles interrogation scene, with "if this is a counselor ship, then where is the ambassador?" Replaced by "if this is a bulk freighter, then why is your vault magnetically sealed?" I mean, it lacks the same weight. It's kind of tacky and nowhere near as good as the original, but I suppose it gets the job done. That said, the editing feels a bit off, and there's something strange about all the merchants being human while the pirates are a diverse mix of aliens. It's hard to wonder what kind of message Disney Lucasfilm is trying to send here. The scene itself wraps up humorously with Captain Silvo realizing that this freighter has no credits, in turn prompting his second-in-command, Brutus, to call for a mutiny against him. And I will say this, at least, I am loving that they made one of the main baddies in this show part of the Shishtavanian race, which of course originally showed up in the New Hope Cantina scene before George Lucas decided to erase the Star Wars Wolfman alien in the special edition version of the film. So yeah, it's nice to see that a Shishtavanian is back in live action. From there, we move to the planet at Aden, where the main kid characters live. And it's a surprisingly modern-looking world, almost too modern, feeling more like a suburban neighborhood on planet Earth than a typical Star Wars planet. And while jarring at first, when you do stop and think about just how vast the Star Wars galaxy is and how each planet differs greatly from one another, then I guess I can accept that there is and could be a planet like this that exists in Star Wars. Sure, just because we didn't see something like this before doesn't mean it can't exist. Anyway, the group of kids who will eventually form the Skeleton Crew includes Wim, an optimistic Jedi enthusiast who's hungry for adventure. His best friend Neil, a cautious elephant-like alien who learns to step outside his comfort zone. Then there's Fern, a rebellious leader and a daughter of a government official. And her own best friend KB, a tech-savvy problem solver. Wim and Neil don't initially know Fern and KB, but their paths cross later on as the result from after Wim, who originally misses his bus, tries biking to school and stumbles upon a ditch where he discovers what he believes to be a Jedi temple. But of course, as we the viewers very well know, it's definitely not that, and it's odd that Wim, who, may I remind you, is very much obsessed with Jedi lore, always reading about them on his Star Wars iPad, plays pretend Jedi with his friend Neil, and owns Jedi and Sith toy figures, could mistake this for one. It's very weird. Oh, and also strangely, Wim also never mentions the name of Luke Skywalker, which feels like a glaring omission given the timeline that the show is set after the events of Return of the Jedi. And well, yeah, Luke Skywalker at this point is the most famous Jedi in the galaxy and all. Yet no mention whatsoever. Like I said, very, very strange. But yeah, the kids end up realizing that the so-called Jedi Temple is actually a spaceship. And Wim accidentally activates it, launching him and his friends into space, while his father, Wendell, watches in horror. The episode ends with the kids looking out at the stars and then asking, what are they? Which, it's an incredibly odd thing to ask and say for some well-off kids living in the Star Wars universe of all places. Yet having such little knowledge about space, it's strange. Although, to be fair, we don't really see any stars in the night sky on Adin. As well, there also being a mention about some kind of barrier sealing the planet, which you could assume is the reason for the lack of stars in the sky. Which then, I suppose in that case, it does somewhat make sense for the kids, to ask about this. But at the same time, you'd also expect them, to see stars in space through various media on their home planet at least. Like, come on, as they apparently also have easy access to that bizarre circus hologram show from the holiday special of all things. Which, mind you, was a fun Easter egg, although I'd imagine it would probably piss off George, but yeah. Again, they've seen nothing or very little of space itself, but they see this crazy stuff. It's, something's not quite adding up here. Now, as for episode 1, I have to say that it did drag on a lot, and I found myself getting bored at moments. So I could see why they opted to instead release 2 episodes at once on premiere day than just 1, and thankfully they did. Because episode 2 is where things actually started getting interesting. And that is with a big help with the introduction of the Skeleton Crew mascot droid, SM-33. A quirky droid who has been offline for years and years and mistakes Fern for his new captain. SM-33 then agrees to help the kids find their way back home, but reveals that Adin isn't on any galactic map, deepening the mystery of their home planet. The droid then takes them to a pirate spaceport, which feels like a modern take of the Mos Eisley Cantina, complete with a vibrant set design and many colorful aliens. With, actually containing some of the best alien designs and costumes that we've seen in a Star Wars live-action TV series to date, in my opinion. There's even a fun little Easter egg featuring Fuzzball, a red bird-like alien creature that was Michael Jackson's sidekick from the 1980s Disney Park 3D show Captain EO. Talk about random but cool at the same time. Which, if they had this little guy and the Star Tours droid back in episode 1, then I'm not gonna be surprised if we see any more Easter eggs and references to other Disney rides in future Skeleton Crew episodes. Unfortunately, the dialogue here continues to be a hit or miss. Like, for example, the kids acting amazed at seeing aliens, even though Neil is one and their home planet seems to host many species. Yeah, it makes no sense whatsoever, even more so that this line of dialogue comes straight from Neil, who's, an alien himself. Afterwards, another example of strange dialogue is when an alien woman from a nearby brothel comes up to Fern and KB and randomly asks them if they're children?
Are you children? Are you children?
At the spaceport, Wim tries to buy food with credits his dad gave him before for lunch money, only to then discover that they're actually incredibly valuable Old Republic credits. A strange detail that adds to the growing mystery of Adin. And as the locals begin to laugh at Wim's mention of Adin 2, calling it a pirate myth about a planet holding eternal treasure, essentially Space Atlantis. The pirates then soon chase the kids and SM-33 steps in to protect them. And then we end up getting a pretty neat but short action sequence of the droid fighting off against many of the pirates, showing him to be a capable fighter when needed, despite his advanced age. However, the pirates do eventually beat SM-33, and Brutus, the leader of the outpost, has the kids thrown in the brig. Which is honestly what I expected to see happen, as otherwise it would have been way too unbelievable that some old, clunky droid could beat up an entire port filled with pirates. Although, when in the brig, I was surprised to see that the pirates apparently didn't bother to steal anything off of the kids. I mean, wasn't the whole reason that the pirates even wanted anything to do with women friends was because he had valuable Old Republic credits? So, I mean, once they captured him, why didn't they try to steal those said credits from him? So it kind of defeats the point of what they set out to do. So either these are super nice pirates or incredibly dumb. Which, well, safe to say at this point that it's more of option B than anything. In the brig, the kids meet Jod Na Nawood, a mysterious prisoner who offers to help them escape in exchange for joining their group. And normally this wouldn't really be anyone notable to mention. However, for the fact that Jod hints at being a Jedi and using what appears to be the Force to grab the prison cell keys to free them, which is all well and good, but I've got some questions. Because if he really is a Jedi, then why is he chilling in the brig this entire time waiting for some kids to help him escape? When he could just had escaped on his own a long time ago. You know, force grab the keys himself, stow away on a starship, or mind trick his way off the port, literally do almost anything, which would have been better than what he was instead doing by sitting in the shadows. Not to mention that his actor, Jude Law's comments in the press before the release of the episode about his character being morally ambiguous certainly fuels speculation that Jod might not be trustworthy. And this leads me to think that we might get a predictable double cross from him later on in the series, with Jod perhaps afterwards getting a change of heart after betraying the kids and turns out that he's not a Jedi, although he then learns the true meaning of friendship or something like that. Oh, and yeah, I've also noticed that people are suggesting that Jod is perhaps actually the pirate Captain Silvo from the opening scene too, which would also track with him potentially being a dirtbag. But who knows, this is all speculation of course. Now, as for episode 2, I'd say it's for sure stronger than episode 1, very much picking up the pace and diving into the story's mysteries, and moving away from Aden's suburban setting to the familiar grit of spaceports and pirate outposts is a good shift. SM-33 is a fun addition, and the mystery surrounding Aden's isolation adds depth to the show that I originally did not expect but do welcome. However, the inconsistent dialogue and the fact that episode 2 was just so incredibly short was a tad shame. Overall, I came into Skeleton Crew with very low expectations. And while nothing so far has completely blown me away, it's also not a complete disaster or terrible slop or anything like that. Rather, it's just fine, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Things started to get a bit more engaging with episode 2 after a very slow-paced first episode. And honestly, it's pretty much what we expected from the trailers, a coming-of-age Amblin-style adventure, a kind of space Goonies, with it trying to give us a dose of 80s nostalgia, pretty much the same that, Stranger Things does. But well, the difference between those two is day and night. Stranger Things just has much more superior writing in general, the characters there are way more likable than they are here, and they overall had a better mystery there as well. Meanwhile here, while much of the story has been predictable so far, I do at least appreciate the impressive set design, the creative alien work, and especially the small intriguing hints about the greater mystery of Aden. I mean, it's alright for what it is. And as it stands, it does seem plausible to me that the kids' home planet Aden has been isolated from the galaxy for so long that its inhabitants are still stuck in the mindset of the Old Republic, completely unaware of the events that happened in the rest of the galaxy like the High Republic, the Clone Wars, the Empire, or the New Republic. So that's kinda fun. And this show also feels very much like a Treasure Island but Star Wars twist, as instead of searching for the treasure, the kids unknowingly live there and have now left it behind and need to get back. And yeah, the heavy focus on pirates makes sense in that context, with especially SM-33 being a nod to Shmi, even complete with a peg leg too. And I like to think that really reinforces the inspiration. Now, it goes without saying that this show is clearly aimed at younger audiences, and there's nothing wrong with that, as it very much reminds me of the Lucasfilm kid-friendly Ewok movies from the 80s. And those films were goofy, campy, and not made with adults in mind. Yet there were some older fans that still tuned in back then simply because they were hungry for more Star Wars content. And the same applies here too. So while I'm not the target audience for Skeleton Crew, that's perfectly fine. It doesn't need to win me over completely to be successful. Although it didn't leave me clamoring for more the way that Andor or The Mandalorian did, I can still appreciate what it brings to the table, and the mystery surrounding Aden has certainly piqued my interest, particularly from a lore perspective mostly. And hey, that's enough, as that intrigue alone has kept me invested for more. And if it can expand on the groundwork it's laid so far and truly deliver on its promises, then Skeleton Crew could perhaps prove to be a journey worth taking. And that was my take on the Skeleton Crew series premiere. Let me know what you all thought about the episodes yourself in the comments below. And if you haven't already, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you on the next one.